The hardest part of sales, by a country mile, is handling failure. If you go into sales, you've had a fairly successful track record in the art of human communication. That's why you went into sales, because you get on well with people, social settings are good. Oh, you can tell the joke, tell the story, or ask good questions and listen to people. So you leave school, college, university with a feeling of, I'm good at this game of communication, of making people feel good, I'm good at it. And then you go into sales, and it's a bit dependent what kind of sales you go into, but a very high proportion of people when they first go into sales are going into a new business role where they've got to approach people who aren't expecting to hear from them, whether they're knocking on doors or making calls or whatever it might be, or even using social media to get in front of people. You're going in cold. And you go from this very high success rate of getting on well with people to very low. And that completely messes with your mind. And again, depend on the job you do and the kind of market you're in. You can have an amazing living in sales on a 2 to 5% success rate. I work with companies where their sales teams will be earning 100, 150, 200, 250,000 pounds a year based on a 2 to 3% success rate of all the people they speak to, because the margins are so big, the jobs are so big. But to be able to handle rejection day in and day out is by miles the hardest part of sales. I think it can be easy to fall into the trap of thinking that because 95% of those conversations go nowhere, you have to detach yourself from those people and therefore detaching your emotions. And that could lead to being transactional, not really caring, and just going through the motions. I don't think that's the best way. I think if you end up going that way, you won't last long in sales, because sales is about connecting with people, and you are making a conscious decision to disconnect from people. And also, when do you disconnect? When do you decide they're not serious? Because some people sound like they're not interested to begin with, and then a week later or a year later, they are interested. So I think what you actually have to do in sales is develop this duality of thinking. You have to really care while you're in the game, while you're playing the game of trying to win them over. But when it doesn't work and they say, I'm not interested, or they ask you not to call them again, or they say, we've gone with somebody else, all the different thousands of reasons you lose deals, when that happens, you try and address their concerns, see if you can change their mind. If you can't, you have to go from caring deeply to not caring at all. And there's a wonderful talk given by Roger Federer on just this point about in his career as a top tennis player of the last 20 years, where he talked about the fact that he won 80% of the matches he played, was one of the greatest players of all time. But he only won 54% of all the points he played. And he talked about this idea that in the point, during the point, it must be the most important thing in the world for you. Nothing else is clouding your thought. But the moment the point is finished, whether you won it or you lost it, it's finished. And now the next most important thing is the next point. And it's a lovely example of that kind of mindset. So I often talk about care, 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 not care. Care, 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 not care. Because I think if you just go to not caring and you just become transactional, and it just becomes about getting your pay at the end of the month and keeping your roof above your head, or buying your champagne, or whatever you do in the job for, you get too detached, you get too cold. And I think there are too many other costs to that, which will likely cost you your sales career. But it takes time to get used to that angle of really, really care whilst you're in the game and then cut off completely. It took me years, literally years, probably decades, to learn to do that well. I think being able to flick between caring and not caring is complicated. Well, I hope it is. It took me decades to learn it. So I hope I couldn't have learned it in a minute, but maybe I can help people get there a bit quicker. I think two elements come to play. It's not so much techniques. I think it's about mindsets, or the way we respond to things that happen to us. So the first thing is to recognize that although you're personally involved in a sales process, you're the one trying to understand the client and trying to position your product, service, ideas, whatever it might be. Because we all sell internally in companies and jobs as well as externally, of course. But whoever you're trying to sell, whatever you're selling, you feel invested because it's part of you. But when they say no to you, they're not saying no to you. They're saying no to the idea, to the product, to the service. It wasn't right now. There was time for them to buy. They found something better, cheaper, quicker, sexier, whatever it might be. They're not actually rejected you. And that's difficult to get when you first start because it feels personal. It's your name on the board, it's your commission check or whatever it might be. But to recognise they've said no to the product and the idea, not to you. Not easy, but that's one element. The second, and again, you kind of have to master this if you're going to have a long career in sales and be happy, is you have to focus on what you can control. And when the deal has been lost, and I mean properly lost, like there's no objections, there's no negotiation, it's gone. It's gone. It's dead for now. You can always come back later. You can't control it. So all you're doing now is making a decision of, do I beat myself up? Do I get myself down? Do I inflict that misery on everyone else in my office and in my home over something I simply cannot change? And I think you have to focus on controlling the controllables. There's a phrase I use again and again and again in sales training, coaching that I do. There's so many things you can't control. I never understand why people complain about the weather. And I know it's a British thing. We all have a complaint. Why? You can't control it. You're just filling your day with negative thoughts about something beyond your control. Why are you deciding to do that? Now, I know in British culture, it becomes small talk. All right, fine, if you just have it where it is. But if people genuinely complain about things they can't control, I think you're just adding a negative mindset, adding negative content into your life when you can't do it. So if the deal's gone, if you've reviewed it and you did everything you could to win that deal, it's gone. You'll just make yourself unhappy and preoccupied with something that's gone. And what actually happens when you do that is you're not focusing on the next client and the next client and the next client. And that's where your money is. That's where your value is.